Good morning. So today we are on lesson 2 of our graphing lines unit. We are on page 7 today, where we are going to start talking about slope. So this is in your packet. So make sure you have your packet and you open it up to page 7 and you follow along. So it says, last class we learned that equations with two variables have an infinite number of solutions. And these solutions are points, x comma y. Remember, x is always first, y is always second, that form a line when graphed. So we saw that we could graph the lines and graph the points and they make a line. And we also saw that we could take that point, x comma y, plug in the x, plug in the y, and it should work out when we check it. So we call this a linear linear equation. The slope of a line is what we're talking about today. The slope of a line tells us if the line is increasing, if we have a positive slope, or decreasing, if we have a negative slope. It is also known as the rate of change. That word is huge. That phrase, I guess, is huge in Algebra 1. They always ask problems about rate of change. Anytime they say rate of change, they really just mean the slope of that line. So it's also known as the rate of change, and it tells us how steep the line is. So we saw a preview to this with Savis on Monday, but slope is a ratio of the change in the y-coordinates, called the rise, to the change in the x-coordinates, called the run, as you move from left to right point by point. So we have our slope is rise over run. Remember, rise is your y-coordinates, run is the x-coordinates. The graph to the right has a rise. Let's look at this graph over here. So this graph, the rise, I go up 3 boxes. And my run, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units to the right. So my run is 5. So my rise is 3 and my run is 5. That's how I moved from this nice point over to this nice point. You always want to choose the pretty points, the ones that cross perfectly. So I go up 3 and to the right 5. So I have a rise of 3 and a run of 5. So therefore, slope, we use the letter m for slope. So it's like k and y equals kx, but now we're going to switch it to m. So the slope m is equal to our rise over run, which our rise was 3, over our run was 5. So we say the slope is 3/5, up 3 over 5. So here's another example. The rise is the difference in y values of the 2 points on the line. The run is the difference in our x values. Slope is that ratio of rise to run. So you can think of it as rise over run. You can also think of it as how your y values are changing and how your x values are changing. So here our slope was 3/2, because to get from one point to the next, I was going up 3 to the right 2, up 3 to the right 2, up 3 to the right 2. Rise on top, run on the bottom, up 3 to the right 2. So we're really finding that pattern in the points on the graph. So here we've got 2 examples. Find the slope of each line. They already kind of indicated the nice points for us, but there's another one down here if you wanted to use it. So our slope m is equal to rise over run. Let's start with a rise. I'm going to start with the point on the left. I have to go up 1, 2, 3 units. So my rise is 3. Now we're going to find the run. I go to the right 1 unit. So my run is 1. I can double check that. Up 3, 1, 2, 3, over 1. Yep. Up 3, over 1. So my slope m equals 3 over 1, or just 3. 3 divided by 1 is 3. For letter B, there is a nice point in the middle if you want to make that a stopping point, or you could use the 2 that are there and then simplify. That is up to you. So my slope m is equal to rise over run. First, I'm going to do that without that nice point in the middle, just to see how you can simplify these. So I'm going to start with the point on the left here, negative 3, 3. My rise, I go down 2. So I'm going to make that a downward direction, going in the negative direction. And then I go to the right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to get to that point. So again, I'm kind of making a staircase, getting from one point to the next. So I went down 2, and then I went to the right 6. If you simplify this fraction, remember you can use your calculator to help you. Negative 2 divided by 6. Click second PRB, you would get negative 1/3 as your slope. Now let's take a look at that on our graph. If I start at this first point here, and I go down 1, because this is a negative, I would be going down 1. And then a run of 3 means I'm going to the right 3. Hey, look, I end up at that point in the middle. And then if I go down 1 again to the right 3, I end up at the next point. So this slope kind of tells us the pattern to get from point to point on the graph. This one was a negative slope, so notice my line is going down. When I look at it from left to right, like reading a book, my slope is going down, so I got a negative slope as my answer. This was a negative 1/3, so I'm going down 1 over 3, down 1 to the right 3. Down here we've got our 4 types of slope here. We saw an example of the positive slope above in letter A. Our line is going up from left to right. I should get a positive number for m. So if your line is going up, it's a positive value for m. If our line is going down, we are going to get a negative number for m. And then this is a slope of 0. The reason it's a slope of 0 is because if you think about rise over run, no matter what 2 points you pick here, there is no rise. You're not going up, you're not going down, so your rise would be 0 over some number. Doesn't really matter what the number is. I'll just call it r, but no matter what the run is, the rise is always going to be 0 because you're not going up or down at all. 0 over any number is just 0. 0 out of 10 is 0. 0 out of 100. 0 out of 5,000. It's always 0. Our vertical line here, we call this the undefined slope. The reason it's undefined is because you cannot divide by 0. If we have rise over run, our rise, if you pick some points, there will be a rise. Say this rise was 2. However, the run is left to right, the change in your x's. Our x values of those 2 points did not change. We did not go left, we did not go right, therefore the run is 0. If you try to type that in on your calculator, it's going to say error divide by 0, because you can't divide by 0. So instead of just leaving it like that, we say it's undefined. 2 divided by 0 is not a number. All right, pause if you need to, otherwise turn the page. All right, on the next page it says tell whether the slope of the line is positive, negative, 0, or undefined, and then find the slope. So here I've got my line is going up, so I know it is going to be a positive slope. Now we're going to find the slope. Rise over run. My rise, I'm going to look at the 2 points they gave me. My rise, I go up 2 boxes. You always want to check your scale too. I know the scale is going up by 1s, so 2 boxes truly is 2, but sometimes they change the scale on you. So I go up 2, and then to the right how many is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I go up 2, so positive 2, and then to the right 6, both positive directions. And that simplifies to 1 over 3, which again, you can use your calculator for. For the next one, my line is going down, so that's going to be a negative slope. And if we find our rise over run, I'm going to count the boxes as I move from point to point, starting on the left. So I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4. It's down 4, so that's towards the negative, so negative 4. And then my run, 1, 2 to the right. The right is a positive direction, so negative 4 over 2. Negative 4 divided by 2 is a negative 2. Now notice how this graph here in number 2 is very steep, and we got negative 2 as our answer. The graph in 1, it's not very steep at all. It's much more of a slight incline, and our slope is 1/3. So anytime you have a number that's less than 1/3 is smaller than 1, smaller than a whole, your slope is going to be much less steep. Then when you have numbers that are greater than 1, either in the positive or negative way, we have a very steep incline there. Number 3, you might recognize this one from the other page. It is a 0 slope. So if I think rise over run, my rise, I'm not going up, I'm not going down at all. It's 0. And then our change in x values for these 2 points, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to the right. But of course, 0 out of 6 is 0. So it has to be a 0 slope. And if you want to figure out the slope first and then determine if it's positive or negative, that's fine too. Moving on to number 4. You might remember this one, but if not, let's start with the rise over run. So looking at these 2 nice points here, our rise, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down, so negative 5. And then we don't go left or right at all, so our run is 0. And if you tried to type that in the calculator, it would give you an error. That error, remember, means undefined. Also, if you had done this with a positive 5, thinking bottom to top, that's also okay. I just typically go in the order that we read. Number 5, starting with our points. Rise over run, rise is up or down. I go down 1, 2, 3, down 3, so negative 3. And then my run is 1, 2, 3, 4. I go to the right 4, so negative 3/4. If this fraction could be simplified, you'd want to simplify it. I got a negative number, so my line should be going down. It is. This is a negative slope. Number 6, I've got here the points negative 2, 1, and 2, 4. I'm going to start on the left here, like how we read. Our rise is up 1, 2, 3. And our run is to the right 1, 2, 3, 4. So this time it was a positive 3/4, which makes sense because they're almost equal steepness going up and down here. They look pretty similar. And we got a positive number, which does mean this is a positive slope. The fact that our line is increasing, it's going up, also means it is a positive slope. All right, so that is how you find slope using rise over run. There is another way to find slope that is kind of like a little formula. In the formula, you can use it with any 2 points. The formula is kind of nice for word problems, or if there's not really pretty points, but they had labeled some for you, you could use this. So the slope, it says, if you know any 2 points on a line or 2 solutions of a linear equation, you can find the slope of the line without graphing. The slope m of a line through points x1 and y1, x2, y2 is as follows. So really this just means it's our first point. This just means our second point. It does not matter which one you do as which. It doesn't matter which one you make the first and which one you make the second. Just make sure you keep everything organized. Really, all this formula means is that you subtract your 2 y values on top and you subtract the 2 x values on the bottom. We saw a preview of this on Monday in Savas. So I've got these 2 points here. B is 2, 7, and C is -3, -2. I'm going to label them x1, y1, my first point. My second one, I'm going to label x2, y2. So then when I plug them in, I'm going to write down my formula first. y2 minus y1, subtract my y values. And then I'm going to subtract the x values. x2 minus x1. You want to make sure you keep the order the same. So if I put point C first, y2, x2, then I need to put point C first on the bottom as well. So now I'm going to plug these in. So for my y2, I'm plugging in the y value of my second point, -2. Then I'm going to subtract the y value of my first point. So y1, the y value of my first point is 7. Then all that's divided by the x value for my second point, x2, which is -3, minus the x value for my first point. So the x value for my first point is 2. So then all you have to do is simplify this. I would use your calculator just to be extra careful with the negatives and do the top first and then the bottom. So on the top, -2 minus 7 is -9. On the bottom, -3 minus 2 is -5. A negative divided by a negative we know is positive, so I can make this 9/5. If you had typed this in the calculator, you probably would have gotten a decimal or a mixed number. That is also fine. I sometimes like to keep it as an improper fraction because if I were to graph this, I would want one number over another number, or rise over a run. But you could also say that this is 1 4/5. However, that's not a nice rise over a run, so it would be a little trickier to graph. You could also say that this is 1.8, would also be acceptable. Any of those answers are correct. So we plug in our points, and then we simplify the top, simplify the bottom, and if it's a fraction you can simplify, you may simplify that as well. Pause if you need to. Otherwise, go to the back. All right, on the back, we've got some examples. So for example 1, I'm going to start off by labeling x1, y1, x2, y2. Now I'm going to plug in the points. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I'm going to start with my y values. y2, I've got -5 minus -1. Now you need to be very careful with your positives and negatives here. This is -5 minus -1. You could put them in parentheses if that helps you as well. On the bottom, I'm subtracting -2 minus -4. -2 minus -4. So then we simplify. You can use your calculator. -5 minus -1. That would give us -4. And then on the bottom, -2 minus -4 is a positive 2. Then we look to see if we can simplify this. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. Moving on to number 2, first thing we do is label. And write down our formula. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I really suggest you write down this formula every time because it is going to be something that we use all of next year, and it's very important on the Algebra 1 Regents exam that you will take next June. So because of that, I would really make sure that you write down the formula every single time. You need to know it for the Regents. They do not give it to you. You have to know how to use this. All right, so then we fill it in. You know, I'm going to subtract 2 numbers on top, subtract 2 numbers on the bottom. y2 minus y1. I've got 9 minus 1. And then on the bottom, x2 minus x1, I've got 8 minus 2. These were all positive numbers, which was nice. 9 minus 1 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 6. We should try and simplify this if we can. If I was graphing, I would want to keep this improper, which would simplify to 4/3. Or if they just want to know what the slope is, you could give a mixed number, 1 and 1/3, which is the same as 1.3 repeating. However, if we were graphing, 4 over 3 is nice because I know my rise would be 4 and my run would be 3 on that graph. All right, moving on to number 3. First thing we do is label. And write down our formula. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I'm going to start by subtracting my y values. I've got negative 6 minus negative 8. Negative 6 minus negative 8. And then on the bottom, my x values, I've got 7 minus 14. So then we simplify. Negative 6 minus negative 8 is a positive 2. 7 minus 14 is a negative 7. I cannot simplify this one anymore, so I'm just going to leave it. Moving on to number 4. I suggest that you try some of these on your own, like pause the video, try some of them on your own, and then check your work. You do have a quiz on this stuff next Friday, so a week from today. So you got a week to get it down, but we are going to move on to actually graphing and things like that soon. So I suggest that you try some of these on your own first and then use the video to check your work. All right, let's label x1, y1, x2, y2. Our formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I like to set it up first. I feel like it helps me be careful with my positives and negatives. Now I'm going to fill it in. My y2 minus y1, 6 minus 5. And then I've got x2, 3, minus x1, 2. 3 minus 2. Then we fill it in, or simplify it. 6 minus 5 is 1. 3 minus 2 is also 1. 1 divided by 1 is just 1. So this would be the line that's really nice going through like the corner of each box. 1 over 1. Up 1 over 1. Up 1 over 1. Number 5. Label x1, y1, x2, y2. Write down our formula. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And we fill it in. y2 is 2, minus our first y, 6, 2 minus 6, and then on the bottom, x2, our second x value, 0, minus our first x value, 2. 2 minus 6 is negative 4, and then 0 minus 2 is negative 2. If we divide this, negative 4 divided by negative 2 is a positive 2 for our slope. So I'm going up 2, and any number is over 1, so I'm going up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1 for that slope. Up 2 over 1. You can just leave it at 2 though. And our last example, label them x1, y1, x2, y2. I'm going to write down our formula. M equals M for slope, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now they use an M instead of a K because K is really only supposed to be used when things are proportional. Because it is the constant of proportionality. A lot of the graphs that we look at in 8th grade are not proportional. You saw that because a lot of our graphs did not go through the origin recently. So now we're starting to look at things that are not proportional. That's why they wanted to put a different letter with it. I don't know why M, but I like to think that M stands for move. It's how you move from one point to the next, up 1 over 1, or down 1 over 2. It's how you move from one point to the next. So if we fill this in, our y2 is 6, minus y1 is 4, so 6 minus 4. And then underneath, our x2 is 6, minus x1 is negative 2, so 6 minus negative 2. And then we simplify. 6 minus 4 is 2. 6 minus negative 2 is the same as 6 plus 2, which is 8. So this one simplifies to 1/4. So this slope would be up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1 to move from point to point. All right, next. We've got some more here. It says describe and correct the error in calculating the slope of the line through the points 5, 4, and 0, 2. So we have to see what they did wrong. So our points again are 5, 4, and 0, 2. So if we label this x1, y1, x2, y2, and if we fill it in ourselves, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Anytime you're trying to find a mistake, I suggest you do it yourself first, so that way you can compare your work. So our y2 is 2, which they do have first, minus y1, which is 4. 2 minus 4. Now let's do the bottom. If I fill in x2 first, x2 is 2, minus x1, which is 5. So you'll see that they have 2 minus 4 on the top, but then, oh, I forgot to make this a 0. This is 0. But on the bottom, we have 0 minus 5, x2 minus x1. They have 5 minus 0. So they ended up switching. On top, they did 2 minus 4, which is y2 minus y1. But then on the bottom, they did the wrong order. They did 5 minus 0. You have to keep the points consistent, the order. So if I do the right point minus the left for the y's, then I have to do the right minus the left for the x's as well. So we're going to say they switched. The order of on the bottom is our x values. So they switched the order of the x values. You got to make sure your order is consistent. Down at the bottom, you've got 3 to try on your own. Notice that the first one is labeled as slope equals, the second one is m equals, and the last one is rate of change equals. They all mean the exact same thing. So don't let how they ask screw you up. They all mean the same thing. So for each of them, you're going to do rise over run right now on your own. So pause the video, and then I will put up the answers for you to check your work. All right, here are the answers. Our first one, we had a rise of 1/2, up 1 to the right 2. Our second one, the rise was -2, so I had -4 over 2, and then we simplified that. And the last one, it is a vertical line, so it is undefined. Make sure you know that word, undefined. That's it for today. Your homework is the next page in your packet, page 10 in the packet. So actually it's page 11 because there's a blank page. But the next page is your homework, so make sure you are working on that. 2 because I'm going in.